Every Life is America's pro-life diaper and wipes company. My family absolutely loves them. There's no harsh toxins, there's no chemicals. It's perfectly safe for your little one. We love Every Life, their mission, their vision, everything about them. Use my code VASHTY10 for 10% off your first order. That is VASHTY10 for 10% off your first order. Alrighty, welcome back. We're jumping into part 2 of all things breastfeeding. Cristen, if you haven't listened to the first part, we talked about the benefits of breastfeeding, just all things laying the foundation of breastfeeding. This segment, part 2, Cristen will be talking more about her experience and diving a little bit deeper into it. And we'll wrap up this segment of all the things breastfeeding. So Cristen, let's talk about your initial experience with breastfeeding. What were the challenges that you specifically faced?
Well, goodness, like I touched on a little bit earlier, I came into this thinking it would be smooth, it would be easy, like no big deal. He's just going to pop out and we're going to breastfeed and we're not going to do formula. That'll be that. Oh my gosh, there's been so much more to it than I originally thought. And it became scary. It was scary when I realized it wasn't going to be easy and that it wasn't going to be simple. Because we had latching issues, I had production issues, and like my baby had to have formula in the hospital, and that broke my heart. I was like, oh my gosh, like we are not starting off strong at all. So, and like, I didn't have my own mother to call and ask questions. And so it was a very alone time in that way. My husband was an amazing support, but he's a man, he doesn't really understand it. So it was a very lonely time. But thankfully, like each day went by, it got a little better and a little better. And, staying saturated in prayer, knowing that I cannot do this in my own strength, that he's my creator. He created me to do this, and I needed him now to help me through this. So like, I just had to stay trusting God and just trusting that he had this, he has my baby. Like, so, I mean, that was a big part of it. And there was a lot of pain in the beginning too. Like I did not know it was going to be painful. And I don't know if that's everyone's case, but it was painful for me. And so, but after a couple of weeks, the pain went away and it got a little better. So
I don't think people talk about the pain often, and maybe it's just naive Vashti that went into breastfeeding, but I thought it would be super easy, baby latches, and just milk will flow. But I'm with you. It is so painful. At least it was very, very painful in the beginning, because our babies also figuring it out themselves. We're both on this journey of what are we doing? And she's looking at me, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. What are you doing? But something you mentioned, and you mentioned in the first segment, this is also very spiritual as it is physical. And what I did, and I asked Jared to, because I was having such a difficult time, not with supply, but more so the uncomfortability. I've just always felt pain. And I am very, very peculiar when it comes to feeling comfortable. And I really didn't like just being wet all the time. And so that made me miserable. So I asked my husband to just pray over me, pray over my boobs, which might sound weird, but I was like, just pray over me, because I am having a hard time. It's like, I hate being sticky. I hate being wet. I hate just feeling engorged all the time. I just need prayers to just walk through this peacefully. And you mentioned your husband was a good support system. Jared was a really good support system, and he still is. They don't get it. They don't understand why it's so uncomfortable, but it does help to have a supportive spouse, 1,000,000%. And to couple that with being prayerful in the breastfeeding journey, because the Lord designed your body. And one of my prayers always, it's God, align the cells to do what it needs to do, align my organs, align every part of my body to do what it needs to do to supply and work how you designed it to work. But so let's talk about how you overcame those difficulties while breastfeeding.
Yeah. So I'll say primarily just not giving up. It's very frustrating. And there were times where I'm like, is this like, I don't know how this is going to end. Is it all this work going to be worth it? So sticking with it was definitely, I mean, we wouldn't be here if I didn't stick with it. So just knowing that it would eventually smooth out and that, you know, each day got a little bit better, took the little wins. And like I'll say again, my husband played a huge part in the supportiveness he showed and just encouraging me and not letting me get caught up in the emotions. Like, he was the first to tell me, like, you can't let the emotions cripple you like this or paralyze you like this, because that's going to just stop everything. Like, you're not going to be able to do anything, let alone just the milk production.
Yep.
So yeah, there was just a lot of just needing to stick with it.
And it's messy and people don't see that part of breastfeeding. There have been times where I just sit there and cry.
Yeah.
And that's a part of it. And I don't want to say that's just a part of it, like deal with it. But in reality, if you're walking through this breastfeeding journey and you just feel alone, hey, you're not alone. A lot of women are on this journey with you. And I've sat in the bedroom just crying because it's hard work. And it feels like you're sacrificing your body, but it's a good sacrifice because there's so many benefits, like you mentioned in part one, for your child and for yourself. So what strategies work specifically for you? Maintaining milk supply, ensuring that you were doing breastfeeding the right way for your child. What worked for you?
Yeah. I would say overall, my nutrition was very dialed in throughout the whole pregnancy too. Like, I don't want to get too deep into this, but several years ago, like, I was obese. I was very unhealthy. So I knew I couldn't let that happen again. So like throughout my pregnancy and even postpartum, like my nutrition was very dialed in. I wasn't eating a bunch of processed foods, none of that, none of like the extra sugary drinks. So nutrition's a big part of it, because you got to think of it like your body as a machine, and you're trying to fuel your body to do a certain thing. And if you fuel it with junk, you're not going to get liquid gold.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a big part of it, I believe. And you have to be obnoxiously overhydrated, because I've found, like, even like I might drink maybe 2 big bottles of water a day, but that's not enough to increase my supply.
Right.
And with that being said, like, you'll need to be on a good hydration supplement. It took me a little bit of figuring out which one I liked the best, because the thing with hydration supplements is a lot of them are not good for you. A lot of them are made by Coca-Cola or Pepsi because they wanted a healthy alternative to people who didn't want soda, but it's still with a bunch of poison. So with that being said, you got to be careful with what supplements you're choosing, because when you're drinking that much water, you're flushing out the good things. So a supplement is necessary. You've got to find a way to manage your stress, because in the beginning, like, I would just allow myself to get so overwhelmed and just so emotional about it that I would get stuck, and like I would just be crying on my floor, and that wasn't productive. So like I had to find a way to manage the stress and not to allow it to just make me stuck and not do anything. So there's a lot of it that's a mental battle, and then there's what you're actually doing. So with what I was actually doing, like, let me preface with this. What ended up working for me is what I was told not to do, because I was told it wouldn't work, that it would actually hurt my supply if I did this. But what I was doing wasn't working anyway. So I was like, I'm going to try this and we're going to see how it goes. So with that being said, it could be something that would work for the next, or it may not. So in the beginning, I was pumping anywhere from 5 to 10 times a day on top of breastfeeding. And so I was producing maybe half an ounce each pumping session, if that, probably not even that. And what I noticed was that, like, my breasts were worn out, like they were sore, they were worked, they were sensitive. Like, I just cringed at the thought of putting on the pump again. So that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to space out the pumps. I'm going to pump less frequently, even though they're telling me not to. So I'm going to try it because it's already not working. So we'll see. So I spaced it out. I started pumping less frequently throughout the day, but for longer duration. And after it was just a few days, the soreness healed up, my letdown was improving, and I got my first 3 ounces, and then 4 ounces, and then 5 ounces. And then pretty soon I was getting out like 10 ounces of pumping session per side. So I was like, oh, okay, this is what I need to do. And that's been a big controversial thing on my page, because I'm like, people want to argue, and I'm like, it worked for me, so that's why I'm talking about it, because it could work for someone else.
Exactly. Absolutely. I didn't pump every 2 hours, like they said initially. I pumped on demand. So whenever I felt like my moves were getting heavy, that's when I pumped, because my thought process was, if I don't feel anything, there probably isn't anything in there. So I'm not going to pump and then get discouraged, because that's what I did initially. And I would see the 1 ounce and then I'd be like, wow, that's all I'm producing. You know, I can't do this. She's not going to be eating enough. So I just spaced it out intentionally, but not because, I mean, my reasoning was maybe not logical, but I don't feel like there's anything in there. So I'll just wait until I feel something is in there, and then I'll pump. And it worked for me. I 1,000,000% didn't do the every 2 hours, spaced it out a lot longer. And I find that a lot of the times with being counterculture, we have to go against what everyone says or what majority says. Oh, this is the way to do things. For counterculture, sometimes that's not the way that it actually works. But I'm sure you mentioned you get a lot of heat for that, and people will have their strong opinions about it. But look, it worked for me. It worked for you. I'm sure it works for a lot of different women. How do you manage balancing breastfeeding, pumping, and other responsibilities?
So it can be pretty chaotic. I won't lie. There's a lot of trial and error, even to this day, like, because schedules are changing all the time. Priorities are shifting. There's a lot of, like, you've got to be fluid. You've got to be flexible and just take a deep breath and be like, okay, we'll figure this out. There's a lot of letting go in a way of, because like I'm a perfectionist, so I had to let go of a lot of expectations related to being a perfectionist, because it's definitely not going to be perfect by any standard that I would have. And so like, and again, my husband was a huge, incredible support through all of this. I really don't know what I would have done if he wasn't so involved, or if he wasn't so like, listen, you've got to get your head right. So like, he made sure I had what I needed. If we were out in public, he would help me get situated in the car so I could do what I needed to do. Because just me personally, like, I'm not one that will publicly breastfeed if I can help it. So like, I would always have to go to the car, or I would want to go to the car. It's not like, oh, I can't because I care what people think. It's not that. I don't know. I'm with you. For me.
And for the child too. Like, I personally, if I can help it, I'd much rather go in a car and nurse in the back seat than in public. There have been times where I've had to, but for me, I want Sarah to be comfortable, and she does not like that cover over her.
No,
fuss and kick and punch. It's not comfortable for her, because she's not, majority of the time when she's nursing, there's nothing covering her or touching her.
Right.
So if I can help, I'm with you. It's not I'm ashamed or of what I'm doing or cringy or anything. It's more so I want my child to be comfortable. So I'll just go to the car. It works for me.
Yeah.
But there have been times where I've had to, and it's a fight until she finally gets comfortable.
Yeah, like we had to do it on the plane. He was only 2 weeks old on our first flight. So there were definitely some things we had to navigate where I was like, okay, we have to nurse in public.
Yeah. Alrighty. So balancing breastfeeding, pumping responsibilities, you've had to let go of certain things. You were a perfectionist. I can relate 1,000,000% to that. My mom told me over and over and over the first month. I'm thankful she got to live with me for the first month of Sarah coming or being here on our earth. Is she would sing over and over, the dishes can wait. It can wait. And I would shake my head internally because I'm like, no, it can't. because I don't like dishes in the sink. But I've learned, and I'm still learning, it's okay to have a messy house, to some degree, because I do believe that also affects your mood and how you respond to your child, how you respond to your spouse. So I find at the end of the day, if we can reset the home, awesome. That way I start the morning off in a good mood. And some might say, well, you get to choose your mood. No, your environment affects your mood big time.
Yeah.
So you talked about resources, lactation consultants. Did you personally have any support groups that you found that were beneficial?
Unfortunately, no. That is a big reason why I started sharing so much of my experience.
That was going to be the next question. So
Yeah.
perhaps we can just jump into that.
Yeah. So that was big for me because I did not have a good experience. And I think part of it too was that I came into it thinking it would be simple, smooth, rainbows and butterflies.
Yeah.
That on top of not having a good experience with the support around me, external from my husband, it's like,
Right.
oh, gosh. And granted, I only ever talked to one certified lactation consultant. Talked with her while I was pregnant, even leading up to it and after birth. And I just didn't want to risk talking with another one. I don't know. Because I thought, I don't know. I guess I took it too personally. Like I was like, you're my friend. And not that she was trying to mislead me or misguide me, but it just, I don't know. My trust was hurt and it was broken. So I just knew deep down I had to figure this out on my own. And so I never looked after that. I didn't look for support. I didn't look for groups. I just started sharing what I was doing, what was working, what didn't, and kind of created my own group.
That's awesome. And you are targeting different women or a group of women who probably are in the same shoe as you, where they reached out, didn't have a really good experience. And it's, oh, I can relate with you, and I like your methods. I like what you're doing. I got a ton of advice from a bunch of different people, but like you said in the first segment, take it with a grain of salt. My mom says, eat the meat, spit out the bone. And so there's a lot of bones sometimes. And people might have good intentions. They're, for the most part, not ill-willed in what they're saying. But a lot of times it won't work for you. I am a big believer in just watching the cues of your baby. Your body will respond how it needs to respond. Your body will tell you. And I think that's the way the Lord designed us. We're so unique. We're intricate in our own ways. And God designed our bodies to respond as our child is growing and developing. And you'll figure it out. The resources out there, they're great. But at the end of the day, it's a choice. You get to choose how you navigate this breastfeeding journey. So how would you say you handle societal pressures, personal expectations related to breastfeeding?
I had to ignore a lot of it. Had to tune a lot out because, and I think a lot of the advice and the unsolicited opinions, it comes from their personal experience. And if they didn't have a good one, or if they weren't able to do what they wanted to, like if they weren't able to increase, it's all going to come from their personal experience.
Yes.
So while they may have the best intentions, it's going to be a little sour. Like it's going to be, the water is poison. So I had to constantly remind myself why I was doing this. And like I said, like maybe they had the best intentions, but words have power. So I couldn't get too involved into what they were saying. Like I couldn't just be like, oh my gosh, you're so right. Like I can't imagine what I would do. And so like, just don't even go down that rabbit hole.
I love that.
Yeah. Cause like as soon as you start allowing those thoughts in, it's just, they'll come out of nowhere a couple days later. And so like, you can't let them have any ground in your mind. And like people will deter you whether they mean to or not.
Do you, off topic here, and obviously be like, I prefer not to speak on that. Do you think that having your baby vaginally versus C-section or having your baby, I hate using the word naturally versus IVF. Do you think those play a role in your milk supply, whether you can produce or not?
Honestly, I do. I've read a lot of things. I've talked with a lot of moms, and like, I'm not like, if you ever talk to me on the side, don't think I'm here taking notes. Okay. It stays in my head. So I'm like, I'm like making connections.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed that, like, if with a C-section, it coincides with milk production problems.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't spoken with a lot of IVF moms, but I'm sure it's the same way. So, I mean, that I believe plays a huge role in it.
Okay. And that's good for those of you who are listening who have gone through either IVF or C-section. Don't get discouraged. Your body probably is delayed, or because chemically, which that's the way the Lord designed your body, chemically, to have the baby through the vaginal canal, it sends and release different hormones. It sends a connection to your brain that sends a connection to your breast. Hey, it's time to supply milk. That there might be a delay if it was a C-section baby, and there's interventions there for a reason. Alrighty, so now looking back, is there anything that you wish you had known or done differently regarding breastfeeding, milk supply, anything that you're going to do differently around 2 or 3? If you guys are deciding to have more children, what would you do differently, if there's anything?
Yeah, I'm sure there is going to be a lot that I do differently, just because, like I've said, the first go around, I came into it very naively, and like hindsight's always 2020, right? Yeah. So, and like there is a lot that I probably would have been better off knowing beforehand, but at the same time, like there's truly no way to know these things without walking the walk for yourself. So like we can get ourselves into a lot of trouble, like wishing we had done this or that. And there can be like bitterness and resentfulness, like, gosh, what was I doing? So we like, don't beat yourself up. It happened the way it did for a reason. Now there's purpose in it. And like, I think we want a lot of kids. And so when I do this again, like I do want to try pumping before birth. Okay. To get the colostrum out and to see, like, because I never did that. I never got the colostrum out, so to speak. Yeah. So I'm interested in navigating that before birth for sure.
I will say something that I didn't do that I was told not to do was I didn't pump before Sarah came. Interestingly, though, I'd say a month before she came, I started releasing milk, it's not milk, it's colostrum, right? That comes first. But I'd have like wet patches, and never before has that happened, but it was about the last month that had started. And I was told, I called in to the doctor's office like, hey, I'm releasing milk, or what, I don't know what's happening, but I'm releasing. What do I do? And they were like, oh, do not pump. Whatever you do, just don't pump. One of the nurses, nurse helpers, that will increase your chances of having your baby early. So I didn't. And I wish I did, because my really good friend, I mention her all the time, but she's my only like really close mom friend. And she's the first one in her friend group, I think, that ever started having kids. But she had told me, that's your colostrum coming in, collect it. And I wish I had listened to her. But the second go around, whenever we have more kids, I will do like you, I will pump and get that colostrum out so that my baby can have that whenever they come. But looking back, like you said, hindsight is always 2020. But that's, like you, one thing that I will do differently going into the breastfeeding journey all over again, which I am not done. So what would you say, as we wrap this up, what would you say, one advice, one thing you would want listeners to leave with today, if it's a new mom, a seasoned mom, if there's anything they can take away from segment 1, segment 2, what would that be?
Yeah, well, related to breastfeeding, like if this is what you're wanting to do, if this is the route you're wanting to go on, you need to let it be a non-negotiable for you. You cannot let if I don't, there's always formula, like you can't let that in your head. You've got to let it be non-negotiable. And I believe that is the single most influential piece of my not giving up, because I knew deep down, like, there is no other option. I have to figure this out.
Yep. That's good. Have a mindset that there is no other option. Mm-hmm. Pretend as if you're living on an island and there really is no other option but survival for the fittest, and you have to have your child survive. I love that. Well, Cristen, thank you so much for being on the podcast, being a part of this episode, talking about all things breastfeeding, your journey, your experience, but also the foundation of breastfeeding, the importance of it, and why we as women should be on this journey. If it's not for you, no knock on that. But if you believe breastfeeding is a part of your journey and you want to embark on that, this is a phenomenal episode. You have great experience, a great background in it, and a holistic route and counterculture. And I do believe in this generation, I feel like a lot of us are, at least millennials, are striving for counterculture. We want to do things differently than what society has engraved and told us is the best way. But hopefully we get to have you back on the podcast, talk about your birth story in Europe. Wow. I'd love to have you back on, but that's it for today's episode. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things, and I will see y'all next time. 7 Weeks is America's pro-life coffee. It's premium coffee delivered right to your doorsteps. All roast available, and it's absolutely delicious. Start your morning off with 7 Weeks coffee. It's not just drinking coffee, it's drinking coffee with a purpose. Use my code VASHTY10 for 10% off your first order. That is VASHTY10 for 10% off your first order.